The morning I handed my son the keys to my old workshop tools, I told myself it was just storage. That was 2 years ago. Looking back now, sitting in my own kitchen for the first time in what feels like a lifetime, I understand that moment was the beginning of the end of something I should have protected far more carefully: my independence. My name is not important. What matters is that I am 63 years old. I spent 31 years working as a licensed electrician in the state of Ohio, and I made every decision in my life with the belief that family comes first. That belief cost me more than I ever expected to pay. My wife, Carol, passed away 4 years ago. Pancreatic cancer. She was diagnosed in March and gone by October. 7 months. I have never in my life experienced time moving so slowly and so fast at the same time. After she died, the house we had shared for 26 years felt like a museum. Every room held something of hers: a coffee mug she favored, a book left face down on the nightstand, her reading glasses on the kitchen counter, as if she had just stepped outside for a moment. I could not bring myself to move any of it for almost a year. My son Daniel was living about 40 minutes away with his wife Nicole and their 2 kids, a boy, 8 years old, and a girl who had just turned 5. Daniel called me every Sunday. He drove out on holidays. He was attentive in the way that adult children are attentive when they are busy with their own lives but still genuinely care. I never felt abandoned by him. I want to be clear about that. What happened later did not come from a place of hatred. It came from something quieter and in many ways more dangerous: entitlement that grows so slowly you don't notice it until it has already taken root. About 18 months after Carol died, Daniel brought up the idea of me selling the house and moving closer to them. He framed it gently at first. He said he worried about me alone in a 4-bedroom house. He said the neighborhood had changed. He pointed out that the property taxes had gone up again and that the maintenance on an older home was a lot for one person to manage. All of those things were true. I knew they were true. I had been thinking the same things myself, though I had not said them out loud, because saying them out loud would have meant admitting that the chapter of my life that included Carol was fully, permanently closed. Eventually, I agreed. I sold the house for a fair price, not spectacular, but fair given the market and the age of the property. After paying off the remaining mortgage and covering the costs of the sale, I walked away with $68,000. I also had my pension from the electricians' union, which came out to about $2,100 a month, and a modest amount in a savings account that I had been adding to since my mid-40s. In total, I was not wealthy, but I was not struggling. I had enough. I had planned carefully, the way my own father taught me to plan. Daniel and Nicole had a finished basement in their house. It was not glamorous: a bedroom, a full bathroom, a small sitting area with a window that looked out at ground level into the backyard. But it was private, it was clean, and Daniel had gone out of his way to set it up comfortably before I arrived. He put in a small refrigerator and a coffee maker. Nicole hung curtains. My granddaughter, Lily, made me a paper sign that said Grandpa's Place and taped it to the door at the top of the stairs. I still have that sign. I carried it with me when I left. For the first several months, the arrangement worked well. I paid Daniel $500 a month toward household expenses. I bought my own groceries. I helped with school pickups when Nicole's schedule was tight. I fixed things around the house: a leaking pipe under the kitchen sink, a faulty outdoor outlet, a bathroom fan that had been rattling for apparently 2 years. Daniel laughed and said having a retired electrician in the house was like having a live-in contractor. I laughed too. I felt useful. I felt like I was contributing in ways that went beyond money. Nicole's family lived about 20 minutes away. Her parents, her brother, and her brother's wife came over regularly: birthdays, barbecues, Sunday dinners that seemed to expand every few months. I liked Nicole well enough. She was organized and efficient, and she ran the household with the kind of quiet authority that keeps a busy family functional. Her brother, Marcus, was another matter. Marcus was 34 years old and worked in sales. He drove a truck that was too large for any practical purpose, and talked about money the way some men talk about sports: constantly, enthusiastically, and with the absolute certainty that he knew more than anyone else in the room. He was not a bad person in any obvious way. He was just the kind of person who believes that confidence is the same thing as knowledge and that loudness is the same thing as authority. He made me tired. I noticed early on that Marcus paid close attention whenever finances came up in conversation. If Daniel mentioned that I had paid for something or contributed to a family expense, Marcus would ask follow-up questions with a casualness that felt practiced. How much had the repair cost? Was that covered under warranty? Did I get a good deal on that? Small questions that individually meant nothing but together formed a pattern I did not consciously recognize until much later. About 8 months into living with Daniel and Nicole, I made a decision that I have since revisited many times in my memory, turning it over like a stone to look at what was underneath. I added Daniel to my checking account. Not as the primary account holder I remained that, but as a secondary authorized user. My reasoning at the time was practical. I was not getting any younger. If something happened to me, if I had a health episode, I wanted Daniel to be able to access funds quickly and handle things without waiting for legal processes. It was the kind of sensible precaution that every financial advisor recommends for people my age. I did not think of it as giving Daniel access to my money. I thought of it as contingency planning. I also, around the same time, began having my pension deposited directly into that checking account rather than into my savings account. This was for convenience. I was using the checking account for my regular expenses, and it seemed simpler to have everything in one place. Again, at the time, it seemed like a reasonable adult decision made by a man who had been managing his own finances without incident for 4 decades. What I did not do, and this is the part I have had to make peace with, was pay close enough attention to the account activity in the months that followed. I checked my balance periodically. I was not negligent in any dramatic sense, but I was not scrutinizing every transaction the way I would have if the account had belonged entirely to me. Daniel and I had a comfortable, trusting relationship. I believed I knew my son, and so when I saw withdrawals that I did not immediately recognize, I told myself they were probably household expenses that I had agreed to cover and simply forgotten, or automatic payments that I had set up and lost track of. I told myself a story that was easier than the truth. The moment everything changed was a Tuesday afternoon in November. I had come upstairs to get something from the kitchen, and I heard Daniel on the phone in the living room. He had not heard me come up the stairs. I was not trying to listen, I want to be honest about that, but I heard him before I had the chance to make my presence known. I heard him say, clearly, and without any hesitation, these words, "Don't worry about it. Just use the card. He gets his check every month, and he doesn't keep close track. He won't even know." I stood in the hallway for what felt like several minutes. My hand was on the wall. I could hear my own breathing. The he Daniel was referring to was me. I walked back downstairs quietly, sat down in the chair by the window in my small basement room, and looked at the backyard for a long time without seeing it. That evening I logged into my bank account online for the first time in several weeks, and I went through every transaction line by line for the past 4 months. What I found did not suggest theft on a grand scale. That is important to understand, because it made it more complicated, not less. There were charges I recognized, and charges I did not. There were amounts withdrawn at gas stations I had not visited, at restaurants I had not eaten at a home improvement store on a day when I had been home all afternoon. The amounts were not enormous, individually $40 here, $90 there, $120 for something I could not identify, but added together, over 4 months, they came to slightly more than $2,000. 1 full month of my pension, gone to expenses that were not mine. I did not confront Daniel that night. I did not confront him the next morning. I am not a man who makes decisions quickly when the stakes are high. Carol used to say that my greatest strength and my most frustrating quality were exactly the same thing. I think before I speak. Even when the thinking takes longer than the situation seems to allow. I spent 3 days going over what I had seen and heard, checking my math, making sure I was not misremembering, making sure I was not misunderstanding. I was not. On the fourth day, I called my bank and asked them to remove Daniel as an authorized user on my account. The representative walked me through the process. It took about 15 minutes. When it was done, I felt something shift inside me, a small, quiet realignment, like a compass needle finding north after being held near a magnet for too long. I did not tell Daniel I had done it. I said nothing. A week later, on a Saturday afternoon, Marcus came over for one of the regular family dinners. I was upstairs in the kitchen making coffee when I heard Nicole answer the front door and Marcus walk in. A few minutes later, I heard him ask Daniel, in a tone that was a shade too casual, whether the card was still good, because he had tried to use it at the hardware store that morning and it had been declined. There was a pause. Then Daniel said he would look into it. I poured my coffee and went back downstairs. 2 days after that, Daniel came down to my room. He knocked, which he did not always do, and he sat in the chair across from me with his hands on his knees in a way that reminded me, uncomfortably, of when he was a teenager who had done something wrong and was trying to decide how much to admit to. He told me that Marcus had mentioned the card not working. He said it in a way that left open the question of whether he was confessing or just reporting information. He did not quite look me in the eye. I let him finish. Then I told him, calmly, that I had removed him from the account. I told him I had gone through the transactions, and I told him the number I had arrived at. I did not raise my voice. I have never in my life been able to accomplish anything useful by raising my voice, and I was not going to start that afternoon. I told him that I understood he had not intended to harm me. I told him I believed he had told himself, probably, that it was temporary, that he was going to replace it, that it was almost family money anyway. I told him that none of those things made it acceptable. Daniel was quiet for a long time. When he spoke, he said he was sorry. He said it twice. He said he had not been thinking clearly about what he was doing, that things had been financially tight, that Marcus had needed help with something and Daniel had felt caught between his father and his wife's family. He said he had meant to put it back. I told him I appreciated the apology. I told him I accepted it, because I did as much as one can accept an apology while still understanding that the thing that was broken cannot simply be unbroken by saying the word sorry. I told him I loved him. I told him that was not in question. And then I told him that I had been doing some thinking, and that I had decided it was time for me to make some changes. I had, in fact, been doing more than thinking. In the 2 weeks since I had stood in that hallway, I had made 3 phone calls. The first was to a real estate agent in a town about 25 miles away, far enough to be a clean start, close enough to still see my grandchildren without it being an event. The second was to a financial advisor I had worked with briefly before Carol died, to review what I had and what I could reasonably spend on housing. The third was to a contractor I had known for many years through my work as an electrician, a man I trusted completely, who told me about a small house that had just come onto the market in a quiet neighborhood near a park. It was a 2-bedroom ranch. Solid construction, good bones, newer roof, small yard, a detached garage that I was already imagining filling with my tools. The price was within what I could manage. A combination of most of my savings for the down payment and a small mortgage that my pension could service comfortably with room to spare. Within 3 weeks of that conversation with Daniel, I had put in an offer. Within 6 weeks, I had a closing date. I told Daniel I was moving out approximately 10 days before I left. He was surprised, and I think genuinely hurt, which was not something I had taken pleasure in. Nicole was cooler about it. She had understood from the moment Daniel came back upstairs that afternoon that something had changed that could not be easily changed back. My grandson, who was 9 by then, asked me if he could still come see my workshop. I told him he could come anytime he wanted. Lily cried a little. I held her for a long time and told her that Grandpa's new house had a yard and that we were going to plant tomatoes together in the spring. I moved out on a Saturday in January. My contractor friend helped me with the truck. We made 2 trips. By late afternoon, I was standing in my own kitchen, with my name on the deed, and no one else's, drinking coffee from my own coffee maker, while the winter light came through a window that looked out at a yard that was mine. My workshop, in those first weeks, was nothing but a cold garage with tools stacked along one wall. But I started in on it almost immediately. I built a workbench, first solid oak, longer than I strictly needed, with a vise at one end and a tool rack above. I ran new outlets along two walls. I put in better lighting. I worked slowly, the way you can when there is no one waiting for you and no one keeping track of your time. Every evening I sat down at my kitchen table and ate dinner without the background noise of other people's schedules and obligations pressing in around me. It was quiet in a way that, the first few days, felt almost strange. And then it began to feel like something else entirely. It felt like space. It felt like the specific relief of a man who has been holding his shoulders slightly raised for so long that he stopped noticing until the moment he finally let them drop. Marcus has not contacted me. I did not expect him to. Daniel calls once a week, on Sundays, as he always has. Our conversations are not as easy as they used to be, and I think they may not be again for some time. But they are honest, which is worth more to me at this point in my life than easy. Nicole is polite when I see her. My grandchildren are unchanged. Children have a remarkable ability to move forward without dragging everything that came before. I am not telling this story because I am angry. I was angry, briefly and privately, in the days after I stood in that hallway. But anger is a weather system. It passes through. What I am left with is something more useful. I am left with the understanding that trust, even between parents and children, has to be constructed carefully and maintained honestly. I am left with the knowledge that my financial independence is not a negotiating position or a family resource or a safety net for other people's poor decisions. It is mine. I earned it over 31 years of work and 40 years of careful living, and I am the one responsible for protecting it. I am also left with a workbench I built myself, a yard where I am going to plant tomatoes in the spring, and a kitchen where the coffee is always exactly as strong as I like it. It turns out that at 63, starting over is not the disaster it sounds like. It is, if you do it on your own terms, something considerably closer to the opposite.